Okay, so during the Byzantine era and the late Roman period, and then going kind of overlapping with some of the early Christian stuff and early medieval stuff and a little bit of the Romanesque, we have a lot of things happening in what I'm just generally going to call the Islamic world of art and architecture. So there's many different caliphates, and we're going to go into it a little bit, but mostly I just want you to be aware of the influence. So we've talked a lot about the influence of Christianity in the Byzantine and coming into the Middle Ages in Europe. And Islam is another very influential religion in Europe at this time that has a lot of impact on architecture and artistic methods and portrayals. So it's very relevant to art history in Western art history, basically. So this is just a little intro to kind of talk about what's going on in the Islamic world at this time and how that contributes to art and architecture. Okay, so the religion of Islam arises in Arabia early in the 7th century. And the Prophet Muhammad begins receiving God's revelations. At this point, the Arabic people were not major players on the world stage in the Western world in Europe, which is where this class mostly focuses, as you know. But within about a century, the followers of Islam dominate the Middle East and also take over a lot of the Eastern Mediterranean, which had previously been under the reign of the Byzantine emperors. So we see a huge rise in the influence of followers of Islam in the Western world. By 640, Muslims rule Syria, Palestine, and Iraq. In 642, the Byzantine army abandons Alexandria in Egypt, leaving Egypt open to Muslim conquest. In 651, Islamic forces ended more than 400 years of Sasanian rule in Iran. By 710, all of northern Africa was under Islamic rule. By 732, Muslim forces had reached Poitiers in France. They were defeated there by the Franks under the rule of Charles Martel. Charles Martel, you may not be familiar with, but you probably have heard of his grandson, Charlemagne, who we'll talk about a little later. Okay, in contrast, in Spain, the Muslim rulers of Cordoba flourish until 1031, and Islamic influence in the Iberian Peninsula continue until 1492. So very influential to art and architecture in Spain. In 1492, Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand II overthrow the Muslim rulers in Granada. Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand sponsored Columbus's expedition to the New World. So if those names sound familiar to you, that might be why. Only in Anatolia, which is Turkey now, did stubborn Byzantine resistance slow down the dominance of the Islamic conquest in Eastern Europe. So it does take a while for Constantinople to fall and the Byzantine Empire to be completely overtaken by the Ottoman Turks. Finally, the Muslim forces defeat the Byzantine forces and ended the Byzantine rule in 1453, which is where we left off with the last lecture. Thus begins the Ottoman Empire, which takes over most of the territory that the Byzantine Empire held. Okay, military conquest alone does not account for the far-reaching sweep of Islam from Arabia to India to Northern Africa and all the way over to Spain. The Islamic faith appealed strongly to millions of practitioners. Islam remains one of the most popular religions in the world today. There are Muslims on all continents. It has had a huge cultural impact. It's a major influence around the globe in many ways, but we, of course, in this class, being an art history class, are mostly interested in the art and architectural inspiration. Arabic scholars laid the foundations of arithmetic. The number system we use today is an Arabic number system. Algebra, astronomy, medicine, natural sciences, all would not be what they are today without the contributions of Muslim scholars. During the 12th and 13th centuries, Christian scholars in the West studied Arabic translations of Aristotle and other Greek scholars. So Islamic scholars were also responsible for preserving a lot of classical knowledge that otherwise would have been lost. Arabic love lyrics inspired French troubadours and other poets. During the early centuries of Islamic history, the Muslim world's political and cultural center was the Fertile Crescent of ancient Mesopotamia, which we learned about in our Neolithic unit. The Muslim caliphs expand outward. Like other conquerors, they were also builders on a very grand scale. We still see early Muslim architecture in northern Africa, Spain, and Central Asia, as well as in the Middle East. Okay, all of that is to say that this is a huge cultural part of what we know as Western cultural history. All right, so let's look at some maps so you can see what's going on here. So we have everything in purple is the Umayyad Caliphate. So that's one of the larger caliphates. A caliphate is like an empire, kind of. So it's like an empire for our purposes. Then we can see in green, this is the diminished Byzantine Empire before Constantinople falls. In Italy, we have the Kingdom of the Lombards, which is sort of intermixed with Byzantine. We have the Frankish Kingdom in what's now France and part of Germany. And you can see the Umayyad Caliphate goes all the way from the Middle East, all the way up through northern Africa and into Portugal and most of Spain. Okay, then Constantinople falls. Okay, so this is the Islamic world after the capture of Constantinople from the Byzantines in 1453 and the fall of Granada to the Christians in 1492. So in red we have former Muslim territories. The lines here show us the contemporary countries so you can kind of see where everything is. But you can see even after Spain is reclaimed, the Islamic territories of the various caliphates take over a huge part of the globe, of the Western world. All right, so between 622 and 756, we have Muhammad abandoning Mecca for Medina. The Umayyads, the first Islamic dynasty, built the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem and the Great Mosque in Damascus. 756 to 1453, the Abbasid Caliphate produced the earliest Qurans with Colphic calligraphy. We'll look at all these things in more detail. This is just kind of my overview introduction. The Spanish Umayyad dynasty builds the Great Mosque in its capital at Cordoba. The Nasrid Caliphates construct magnificent palaces at the Alhambra. So we have lots of different dynasties making different impacts in different parts of the world. The Ottomans capture Constantinople in 1453 and develop the domed central plan mosque. The Timurid book illumination flowers under the Husayn Baikara. Under Shah Tahmasp, Safavid artisans perfect the manufacture of the kurda seka, which is ceramic tiles and ceramic works in general. So here's just a breakdown of major Muslim dynasties during this time period and then a little bit beyond the time period we're going to talk about in this section. So we're going to talk a lot about the Umayyads because they are the ruling caliphate in Spain. So they're mostly who we're going to talk about, but we'll look at some other work as well. But here's just like a breakdown of territories and dates under the different dynasties. Okay, so that's your really quick intro to the Islamic world at this time in medieval Europe and neighboring areas, and kind of the reach of its influence as it pertains to Western art history. Okay, so next we'll talk about early Islamic art.